Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the third session of the BuildSG Lead Conversation Series. I'm Ina, and I'll be your host for today. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. The BuildSG Lead Conversation Series is a platform where distinguished fellows share their life experience and philosophy with the younger leaders of the built environment. These conversations seek to connect the lead community through live dialogues between distinguished fellows and the younger leaders like yourself. In the first conversation, we featured Engineer Lee Chuan Sing, Emeritus Chairman of BECA Asia. Engineer Lee shared the importance of innovation leadership and his experience in expanding Singapore's footprint regionally. In the second conversation, held earlier this year, we featured Mr. Wong Hin Fin, Group CEO and Board Directors of Surbana Jurong. Mr. Wong spoke about the importance of developing leaders in organizations and how his drive to succeed led him to building one of the largest consultancy firms in Southeast Asia. Today, we are honored to have Professor Lam Khee, one of our 6 distinguished fellows, with us. Prof. Lam will be sharing with us his professional expertise and experience in the built environment sector, and some personal stories which have molded him into the leader he is today. Here's a brief introduction on Prof. Lam. Prof. Lam is an architect, educator, researcher who specializes in computational design support system for total building performance analysis and building diagnostic. He is a director at the Center for Livable Cities in Singapore and an advisory board member of DLOS in USA. He is also a building performance consultant for several major award-winning projects and certified green buildings in Singapore, China, and USA. He was conferred the inaugural BuildSG Lead Distinguished Fellow by BCA in 2020. With his experience and expertise as a leader in the built environment sector, I'm sure all of us will be able to benefit from his sharing and the conversation we have with him today. Also joining us in the fireside chat session today are 2 young leaders from the Built Environment Young Leaders Program. They are Ms. Carissa Tam, Vice President of Customer Engagement, City Development Limited, and Architect Ng Sin Yong, Senior Architect, ADDP. Both Carissa and Sin Yong are graduates from the first batch of the BuildSG Lead Horizon program. Without keeping you all any longer, let's get started. For those who have questions for Prof. Lam, you may send them in via the Q&A function. Prof. Lam, you were educated in the UK and US, trained as an architect, obtained a UK architect license, and elected as a fellow of the Royal Institute of British Architects. How did you decide on your career as an educator and researcher?
Hi, Tina. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Very good afternoon. Before I start answering questions, let me first of all say a big thank you to everyone for all the effort in organizing these conversations. And I personally am deeply, deeply honored and humbled to be given this award, inaugural award for this fellowship. Really, really very appreciative. So yeah, I want to really keep this conversation of chat more informal, I hope, and the participants can do feel free to pop questions, and I'll try my best to answer. All right, so yeah, of course, first my education and training started in the UK, culminated in me getting my professional life, not just the degree from Nottingham University, but also a professional license as a registered architect in the UK. My first job after graduation was actually with the Nottinghamshire County Council Architects Department, which is actually a local authority, so it's public sector. And it was a great experience then. At that time, I really enjoyed my work with the office because they have a very interesting multidisciplinary approach in the way they conduct business, which I enjoy. And naively, being my first job, I thought that was the norm, but obviously that's not the norm. Huh? The way we were configured in a team, we have architect, the landscape architect, the quantity surveyor, very important, and the engineer sitting together, working on projects all the time. So that was great experience. However, at that moment in time, the then British Conservative Party government started to enact some not so foreigner-friendly policies, immigration policies at that time. And that sort of created some unsettling for me and certainly for my family. And so I then started to look around and see what other options there might be coming back home. Home at that point was Malaysia, by the way. I'm formerly a Malaysian from Ipoh. And so there was a sort of plan, or at least the thinking, to come back. But then at the same time, I was really quite sort of apprehensive about jumping back into the construction industry in practice. You know, I come from a generation or two generations of my family in the building industry in Malaysia. So in some sense, I kind of know the practice, which is going to be really, really different, right, from what I used to in the UK. So I was a little apprehensive. But then at that moment in time, I was reading the newspaper, the design magazine, an advertisement came out from NUS, okay? And I said, oh, this is interesting. So, and they were recruiting lecturers. So I immediately called my former head of the Nottingham School of Architecture, Professor Chris Riley. I said, Professor Riley, can I come talk to you and have a chat about this NUS, opportunity? And he willingly do it. And he was more than happy to chat because he was, in fact, the external examiner to the School of Architecture at NUS for several years. So he knows the school very well, And so he told me the ins and outs of NUS and architecture school. In particular, he said the architecture school had just moved into the Cambridge campus at that time. I mean, just a few years in the early sort of 80s, right? 70s, early 80s. And he said there's a lot of opportunity for growth and they're expanding the school and so on and so forth. So he said, it's a good time to go back. And so I put in my application. Next moment, I knew Professor Norman Edwards from the school flew all the way to UK, came to Nottingham and interviewed me. I was so touched and so impressed. And next moment, I got a job offer. And then I landed in Singapore with my family in October of 1984. That's when I first joined NUS. And the second half of the story, how did I stumble into this longer term commitment? The dean then was Professor Billin, called me up. He said, "Tipo, I want to talk to you." I said, "Okay." He said, "Do you want? Are you thinking of planning your academic career for the long term?" I was kind of puzzled at that point. I said, "I don't understand what you mean. What do you mean by long term? Right? I'm here, am I?" And he basically explained. He said, "Look, NUS is in the pivotal process of changing from what was primarily a teaching university. Its mission was to teach, to produce graduates and professionals to do nation building for Singapore. And they were planning to pivot to a more comprehensive research university. Okay. And so he told me, he said, if you want to continue in academia, you have to go for a PhD. I was like completely shocked, to be honest. PhD, okay? That's unheard of. And he said, well, it's not an option because if the career path will be expected to do research and do publications, etc. So I say, okay, I'll look around. No promises. And it was interesting. I then started looking to the US because I wanted a different experience from UK. And I only located 7 schools of architecture that offered the PhD program at that time, right? In the mid-80s, late 80s. And there are hundreds of architecture schools, but only 7. 5 of them had PhDs in history, theory, and criticism, they call it, so all this philosophy stuff, things. And only 2 schools had something that I wanted, has to do with design and environment. And one of them was Berkeley, UC Berkeley, and the other one was Carnegie Mellon. And I visited all these places and explored it. And frankly, if I was single, Berkeley would have been a no-brainer. California, right? But with a family, and at that point already I had 4 kids, it was financially impossible to do. Even though at that moment in time, Berkeley, I would say, was more established in terms of its program and reputation. Carnegie Mellon was just emerging. But what attracted me to CMU was this very cool new idea called total building performance and diagnostics. And they said, we are championing this. It's a cool new idea. And we're going to build a living lab to test out all this stuff. And I said, great, that's where I want to come. And then the fact of the matter is the cost of living there is like 1/3 of the cost of living in California. By the way, I was also admitted to Harvard, and Harvard was a whole different story. I went to see an apartment in Harvard, around Harvard, and there was a 3-bedroom. I said, no, there are only 2. The student who took me around said, no, here's the 3rd one, and it was a storeroom. Okay, and 3-bedroom, $1,600 US. And this is in the 80s, huh? Remember. When we then decided to go to CMU, and I got a very nice semi-detached house at Pittsburgh, near to campus, and it only cost me $500. You see the difference. So CMU was the place to go, and did my PhD, and then came back, and then continued to serve in the West. And that's how my first phase of my academic life was kind of established.
I can see that, Prof, you made the best of the choice you have made. I mean, sometimes we wanted to go for the best choice, but because of the constraint that we have, so you need to make the best out of it. So this actually brings me to the next question. I mean, you wear multiple hats with appointment in NUS, Carnegie Mellon University, as well as serve in several boards and bodies, both locally and internationally. Were this opportunity laid in front of you, or did you create these opportunities?
Oh, it's really a combination. It is obviously a lot of it has to do with what I personally have always aspired to pursue. But sometimes even more importantly is the timing and the opportunity, right? How that those aspirations can be realized. In my case, I would perhaps illustrate it with two particular instances where this alignment of of things happening, so that we can actually bring things into perspective and get it executed. The first one really has to do with the now we are in the pandemic and everybody's talking about well and health. And when I pursued my PhD at Carnegie Mellon, I mentioned earlier the concept of total building performance and diagnostics. It has always the human condition. It's not about the technology. It's not about the systems and models and practice. It's about what are we trying to achieve. So the four very important criteria, the human condition that we hope to meet is the physiological, psychological, and sociological, and then the economical. And of course, guess which one most people focus on? Economics, right? And this concept that dates back, as I said, in the mid-80s, remain evergreen. And therefore, as I engage in my PhD and post-PhD doing research, I have continued to pursue that. And then when I went to CMU, when I left NUS and went to CMU to teach, I continued that pursuit and was able to conduct research and train PhD students. So along that same sort of aspiration. And when the occasion came around, a certain gentleman by the name of Paul Sheila, who happened to be a Wall Street trader, by the way, a young Wall Street trader. And he suddenly, one day, had this sort of, I suppose, a revelation. He said, the real estate sector around the world is a multi-trillion, and I looked up the numbers, like $4 trillion, okay? And the health sector is an $8 trillion market. He said, why don't these two people talk together, And that was how that kind of idea came about back in the late 2000s. And he went out and raised $50 million US dollars and started the research program with the Mayo Clinic. And after 5-6 years of research, please note how long it takes to do good work. It's not instant, Then the first well building standard was rolled out in 2014. We started up a company called Delos to do the business side, then spin off a IWBI, which is the International Well Building Institute that does the certification. And that is an autonomous certification body, right? So when he started those, he hired 3 of my PhD students. So they said, he told me, he said, your students are absolutely well prepared for what this new pursuit is. And then he told me, he said, can you produce another 10? I need them tomorrow. I said, I'm sorry. By the way, it takes 5 years to produce a PhD, okay? In the US context anyway. So that's the kind of alignment of what I have always aspired to, do, even in the 80s, while during my study days. all the way to passing down to the next generation of students. And when the opportunity sprung up, bingo, right? You fit in right there. Now, again, remember, none of this were in anticipation of COVID, none. And guess what? Everything now pivot very, very nicely into addressing the COVID pandemic requirements, because those conditions and requirements are so well aligned now.
But Prof, I also realized that in somehow you are very resourceful, as in you make the call. I mean, in your earlier sharing, you before that NUS job listing, you also called a professor from Nottingham, or same for this case. So what's your thoughts on, being more proactive in doing a background check, and also, calling and finding out, so you create the opportunities? Yeah, what's your view?
Well, I think this is clearly one of the very important habits or characteristics of being, I suppose, effective. Here, perhaps I could, there was a question earlier pre-prepared asking me what's my favorite book. Well, my favorite book is actually the one by Steve Covey. I think many of you are familiar with that book, called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I think many of you are familiar, right? And Steve Covey in that book has spun off a whole business. Franklin Covey doing a lot of global work now on this, right? This area. And that book actually came out literally time when I started my PhD in August 1989, So, and when it came out, those 7 habits really, really resonated with me. And I said, well, actually, I've been doing that, And the first one is exactly what you say, be proactive. That was the very first point. And the other was begin with the end in mind, so that you always know, or at least plan for where you want to get to, however long and torturous and painful it may be. But in that process, put first thing first. It's very interesting. Put first thing, don't get confused and distracted. And then think win-win. Oh, that philosophy is so important for our construction industry, by the way, which I can talk more about later on if you're interested. How to create win-win. Right now, our construction industry is globally well known to be fragmented. It's true, right? And it's very, very difficult to implement many of these cool ideas that we have. And then this one I like, because it also resonates a bit like with the kind of faith of people. Seek to understand first before making yourself understood. So listen, learn, right? And then learn to synergize, and then collect all this data, put it all together. And last but not least, sharpen the sword. You have got to be competent in deploying your skills and knowledge and the toolkits and so on and so forth. So I think those 7 habits resonated, as I said, very well with me. And as I said, I kind of been doing it naturally, as you say, and I still do today, continuously seeking out what's around the corner.
Yeah, I really do agree with you. Carissa has a question, so maybe let's invite Carissa. Yeah.
Hi, Prof. Lam. Thanks for sharing. I think it's very insightful, and I'm a firm believer of the Stephen Covey book as well. And I think one of the things that always stands out is about always putting the end in mind. And I realized from your sharing, you've had a really colorful past and up to present. There were a lot of opportunities that came by your way, but you seem to, one thing that struck me was that right from the get-go, you seem to already know what exactly you were passionate about and what you really wanted to pursue, even when it was not, it was not on trend, it was not a fad at that time, right? It was not even in a mature stage at that time, but beautifully it has fallen into place right now, given the current situation that we have. And I think it'll be interesting for some of us young leaders who may be starting out to also maybe learn from you. How do we identify, or what advice do you have for us to really find that calling? Some may say it's a calling, or that passion, or steering us to the right direction.
Well, thanks, Carissa. Very good question. You know, that process of mine started when I was 5 years old. I remember some of these events and instances, and I was deeply, deeply influenced by my grandfather, who came from China and settled in Ipoh, where I was born. And he was a carpenter. And bit by bit, he built up a small little contracting business, doing renovations most of the time. And I remember him taking me to site when I was a little kid and explaining to me, you know, how important it is to build it well, choose the right materials. When you build something, make sure it lasts. I never forget those words. I am a little kid, that stuck in my head for a long, long time until today, you know. And what he was talking about is sustainability in today's fashion, right? Even back then, he understood how important it is to be good steward of resources. When you cut a piece of wood, please make sure it is put to well use. Don't waste. Make sure things last. And that really was the beginning of many of those experiences. And then I also remember one day, when I was, he took me to site. He said, "Please behave yourself. The ARIBA is coming." Do you know what that is? That's the UK architects license. The Royal Institute of British Architects. ARIBA. So he was a British trained architect. He said, "He's coming to site. Behave yourself. Don't run around." And from that day, I thought, wow, who is this architect? You know? So important. And that again stuck in my mind quite a lot. So that again, as opportunity came, that kind of those influences came up from time to time, you know. But it doesn't mean everything is paved out, and certainly for my case, it wasn't. I have to make certain choices. And I think one of the points the CEO wanted to find out from me was, what made you make those, what were the most difficult choices, right? Actually, two. One was deciding to go to UK to study. I come from a relatively poor family. And so I had literally a one-way ticket with $100 in my pocket, generosity of relatives and friends of the family, not knowing what will come next, okay? Not knowing when the next support money will be coming from home. It was scary, but at the same time, it was very, very exciting, you know? Step on the plane, first time ever gone on the plane when I was already 20 years old, right? Today, 2 months old baby go on plane, you know? So that was a tough decision to do that. And fast forward, the next most challenging choice was, as I mentioned, there's a PhD study, right? When the dean called me in and said, "Do you want to do this or not?" That was tough because again, it was uprooting the whole family with 4 kids in tow, that time like 3 years old to about 10-year-old. Huge logistics, let alone logistics, you know, fitting them into schools in a totally alien environment of the United States, which we had no idea about. That was a tough kind of challenge. Yeah.
So I think to sum it up, you know, we do appreciate, and I think you have affirmed that exposure is important, because the more we are exposed to, the more we get to dabble in it, try it out. So thanks for sharing that. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
But Prof, I think you also mentioned a few times, right? Even what Carissa mentioned, even, you know, be it it's a calling or you foresee something's going to happen. Do you count courage? You know, one of the key elements. I mean, you have a choice, yes, but you know, that courage to take that first step forward. Do you see that in you, or how do you I mean, what's your thought on having that courage to take that first step, or even foresee that this is the way to go, I should step that first step forward?
In my context, courage, of course, is, as I said, is very scary, right? Going out into that world, not knowing what will happen. But I think it's in the context of today, perhaps, if I could sort of swing back to it, that it is this fear of losing what we have, and the more one has, more endowed in our current life, that I feel does have this impediment towards taking that step into the unknown. If you are already comfortable, right? If I put into a situation where you don't have maid service, you don't have clean clean water, are you willing? Are you ready? Right? I think that's, to me, one of the sort of current challenges if I could pivot to the young. For me, I had nothing to lose, right? Nothing worse can happen, because to start with, there was nothing. So that kind of, made it, I suppose, easier. That there's nothing to lose kind of thinking. Whereas in today's context, and as parents, we work hard to provide for our children, rightly so. But then at the same time, on the flip side is that when the children are so well provided, what would that have, kind of impacted the fear of losing, the fear of, the unknown, and then of course the losing all the comfort and the security. I think that's the real challenge certainly in today's world for those that already have a much higher base to work from. But to me, again, to strike out, you just have to take that leap and say, look, whatever I've been blessed with, great, be thankful, but it's your life, right? How you impart it. I think that would be the way to think about that. I don't wish people to have nothing to do. Obviously not. And certainly I don't tell young people, they probably say, yeah, you old man don't know what you're talking about. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Prof. Lam. Yeah, we also knew that you place great emphasis on walking the talk as a leader. Can you share with us how this attribute has guided you in your personal leadership development?
Yeah. Again, this is something that as far as I can remember in my life, I've always had this one single philosophy in life. Before I can ask somebody to do something, I need to be able to know that I can do it. I know this is a pretty daunting kind of very daunting thought, right? If I can't do it, I have no right, nor the authority, nor to ask somebody else to do it. So, but this has always been in my kind of mind, Perhaps it's kind of been influenced by, again, part of the education that I went through in the UK. When you attend a history class, professor teach you about the ancient history of architecture, and this idea of the master builder was something that stuck in my head. And the master builder is characterized as somebody who really not only design, draw, go on site, select the material, instruct the people building the magnificent architecture in the old days. That stuck in my mind, okay? And so I continue to somehow use that to guide everything that I do. But let me tell you a funny story. Sometimes it's not always very pleasant. When I was working in Nottinghamshire office, I was given a small project to design a extension to a middle school, a secondary school, toilet, bathroom, shower room for the students. And in this room, there is a freestanding wall that separates the shower cubicle from the changing area. And I detailed this very, very carefully and specified special curved tiles for the corners of the exposed edges so that the children don't get cut. Okay, so I did all that. And when I went on site, the guy laying the tile, a very old gentleman, was doing all wrong. And first of all, he didn't provide the curved tiles, the edge corner tiles, which, by the way, I specified and paid for in the tender. They didn't provide. And worst of all, he started laying the tiles from one end of the wall to the other, ending with the other end having to cut the tile. And so the tile was really very jaggy and sharp and dangerous, right, to the kids. So I stopped him. I said, excuse me, you know, what are you doing? This is not right. And you know what he said to me? He said, Mr. Lam, I don't know how long you have been an architect. I have been laying tiles for 40 years. And my instant reaction was, I said, then you should know better what to do. He was so furious. Well, at that time, I haven't learned the art of humility yet. Huh? I was 27 years old. And there was another incident, same thing, similar idea, where I was doing an intern in an engineering company, a civil engineering. I chose to do that. Again, remember, I've been a firm believer in cross-disciplinary. Even though I was training as an architect, I chose to do a year in London with a civil engineer. And I had drawn the entire reinforced concrete construction drawing for a swimming pool. And the engineer boss of mine took me down to site. Say, people go check the bars before they pour the concrete. So I went to check the bars. So started at one end, there were 18 bars. By the way, you see, I remember all these details. I don't know why, okay? It's kind of stuck in my head. 18 bars, major bars. And then I walked to the other side of the swimming pool and there were only 17 bars. So the contractor somehow in the middle of the pool combined 2 to 1, which actually was very difficult to see because there's so many, you know, bars crossing. And I don't think anybody would have expected anyone to go count the bars. Yeah? I don't think. So I quickly ran back and told the boss, the engineer, and he lost his temper. He started yelling at the contractor on site, and both of us almost got beaten up. I'm not joking. The contractor was so angry, almost wanted to beat us up. So that's examples of somehow this is how I have been. Maybe it's a very individual, personal thing that I believe that I need to be able to do something in order to, you know, sort of advise or supervise the work. And that continues to be the case even until now. Of course, in today's world, life is so much more complicated. It gets even more difficult to catch up. And then as you get older, things get a bit slower. But I try to continue to do this, so as to continue to be able to claim this walking the talk. As you can see now in the projects that I do, I continue to demonstrate what I believe in. And not, please remember, it's not a one-man or one-woman job. Huh? Any building project, I have to make sure the team is convinced and listen and agree with me and see what I'm trying to do, right? Then as a team, we can deliver the kind of examples that you see in Singapore.
Yeah, I agree. Everything it's got to be a teamwork, right? So Prof. Lam, you also advocate people-centric building design while championing green building designs. One of your most iconic local projects is the National Library building, which eventually become the first building to receive the Green Mark Platinum Award. You have also contributed to the launch of the Green Mark for Healthier Workplace scheme in 2018. What drives your persistent passion in sustainable and human-centric building design throughout your career?
Well, you know, again, tie it all back to the foundational philosophy and work during my study at Carnegie Mellon. Remember, I said the concept of total building performance and diagnostics and the form. So it all also goes back to that, right? The sort of physiological, psychological, sociological. So that has always been there, and the whole, concern. I mean, buildings are for people, as I always say, right? And the fact that we all spend 90% of our time inside buildings, the responsibility is tremendous. Then again, how does it all happen? It's also very timely. There are kind of occasions that things lined up. And here I have to also acknowledge and tell you a little story concerning BCA. When I first came back to Singapore in 2016, colleagues in BCA called me up and said, "Hey, Prof, we'd like to submit a paper to the US Green Bill." I don't know if you know, the US Green Building Council runs this international Green Bill conference, which is the world's largest green building conference, always 20, sometimes 30,000 people. They said, we want to submit the paper and hope to get a chance to present. And they said they've been trying with little success. I said, well, it's very, very tough. Can you imagine? There are 20, 30,000 people bidding for a slot, right, to talk. But I say, never mind. I had a bit of experience. I had one experience while I was in US that was successful. I was teaming up with a government agency to talk about one building. And that was very interesting too. The architects, engineers, and the client already done the building, but they were looking around for a professor. They said, "We need a professor to talk theory." I'm not joking, that's what they told me. And I said, sure, I'm happy to stand in. And that project, proposal got accepted. And I had no idea how difficult it was. When the letter came, the congratulations, your proposed paper has been accepted for presentation. And this year, you are one of 400. That means for every 400 submissions, they select one. So so with that experience, I teamed up with our colleagues. At the time was Dr. John Pyong was still the CEO. He was about to transition out. So John and I put together, and we invited Steve Salkovitz from the Lawrence Berkeley Lab. So we submitted the proposal, and lo and behold, we got selected and to present. So that was very exciting. And BCA and the industry managed to get a huge contingent to go that year. I think 40 people went, and it was held in Boston. And it was right at that time that Hugh Lim, the immediate past CEO, stepped in. And so we were on this trip together, and I had a lot of occasions to talk to him and to, explain to him all these things about health and wellness and green buildings. And that was really great opportunity, right? To have a captured audience to share this with the CEO. And he was very, very receptive. And that led to this 2018 Green Mark, the first step into the Green Mark for healthy workspaces, which of course now leapfrog to Green Mark 2031, where health and wellness is really very clearly featured. So those are occasions that lean and to realizing many of these things that that I've been dreaming about and trying to do.
Yeah, I agree with you. So grab the opportunity when it's laid in front of you, right? Okay. You also once mentioned in an interview that your career path has always been inspired by good teachers and good mentors who told you to think ahead of the curve. In the previous example of the National Library building, you also demonstrated your ability to think ahead of the curve by designing a sustainable building before such recognition schemes were implemented locally. Can you share with us your key strategies to stay constantly ahead of the curve?
Yeah, so having that conviction and the commitment to see, all these ideas fleshed out in real world is, of course, everybody's dream. That's not mine. The ability to then convince, I think most importantly, the client of projects, who is willing to step up and partner in order to realize this is really, in fact, the most important. And in my life, I have been extremely fortunate to encounter those people, right? In the NLP, the CEO at that time, Dr. Khee, he was great. He was one of those that not only think, and by the way, he has a PhD in computer science, right? So, and he introduced the book checking system. I don't know if you know, where you drop the book and there's the automatic scanning for checking and checking out. So he was absolutely 100% committed to driving this project. So we were able to, for the first time, comprehensively bring the total building performance and diagnostic concept into the project. And by the way, we got it through an international design competition. Right? It wasn't just because I say they believe me. It was an international competition. And my thinking at that time was with all the big names around the world, right? All the famous architects, we thought we are a local team and may not be that well. But you see, again, I have to give credit to the government of Singapore and to NLB, the board at that time under the charge of Khee, who really think ahead, right? Let's not get bogged down with names and brand and stuff like that, but see what people can deliver, what the team can deliver. And we delivered and proved to them how we can deliver real performance, not just paper-based. And very, very happy. I mean, every time I look at the building, I feel very, very proud because the performance really lived up to what we envisaged, what we designed for. The energy part, for example, now it's operating even better than what we designed for. And the ventilation, the natural ventilation of the plaza, I'm sure many of you have been to, people did not believe that could work, Everybody say, Prof, no way can that plaza be ventilated, surrounded by buildings. I said, trust me, it will work. And the way it works is that because it has a high volume, a high ceiling, which is a tropical feature, by the way. So those are the kind of partnership, the trust with the clients that can enable us to do what we do. And here in NUS, of course, SDE4, SDE1, and 3, NUS as a client believed in it, trusted us, so we were able to push for SDE4 in net zero. So I think these are all the kind of bringing together like-minded, people playing the various roles and working as a team. That's why teamwork, I know it's sometimes people think of it as a cliche talk, but it's genuine. The experience as a team that we did in NLB and certainly in SDE4 are really memorable. People continue to talk about it, the tough times we went through, and then also after quarreling, we go to the pub, go to the bar and have a beer and laugh about things. Those are all part and parcel of the experience, that it is not adversarial, it's not personal. It's not, I'm not attacking individuals. It is, we should all be aiming for the outcome, right? The ultimate outcome. And all the poo-poo that we make, we can laugh about it because it's lessons learned, right? And then I can put it into my lecture notes, you see.
Yeah, you're so right.
So they are contributing to the education. So no, shouldn't be feeling bad, huh? And we can laugh over a year or two, yeah.
But what are some of the challenges that you face as an early mover?
Well, the major challenges, as I said just now, is convincing stakeholders, the client, to be willing to take the risk, quote unquote. But I also explained in the the notion of risk in our building industry. Risk comes about when things are uncertain. And when I was working in the UK, fair enough, my projects are all tiny, small, young guy. I would never send any project out for tender if I have not completed the design and details and specification to 80% of everything, minimum. I specify what lock I want, what kind of key set I want, what kind of hinges I want, and so on and so forth. So that when the tenderers tender for the project, they are clear what actually you want, you see. The more clear they are, the less risk there will be, and therefore, they won't have to pile it up and add costs to cover the risk and uncertainty. Whereas in many practices, even today, because we are in a hurry to go don't know where, we always push projects out when details are not done, In the early years, what scared me the most was when I read a drawing and it says to contractors details. That really scares me, okay? First of all, you are the architect, all right? Secondly, you are opening a blank check to the contractor, right? He could detail you a gold tap. You say, well, you told me to detail, I'm detailing a gold tap, please pay up. I mean, right? Jokes aside, that could happen, right? So that's the issue, I think, to be able to take the project timeline and invest upfront a lot of this early decision making. It's a tough one. This to me is one of the big challenges in our industry. We tend to kick the ball down the road kind of thing, pass it down to the last guy. And if necessary, to the subcontractor. And then we kind of out of sight, out of mind. Guess what? You are putting huge risk into the project. And nobody then wants to talk about the additional cost and time and variation. Nobody likes to talk about that because it can be potentially liable, right? You can be sued and so on. So everybody keep quiet and therefore nobody knows better, right? But yet, honestly, we all know where the real situation is. We did this and practiced it in the National Library project. And it was on record that at that time, it is the cheapest government building. Why? Because they were there, we detailed everything. We didn't have to change much. And again, I always tell the story that the contractor will still try, but I will always say, no need, we already detailed. And there's a reason why it's like that, okay? No need to change. You already tendered and we proceed. So that's a big challenge. And I sincerely hope the young leaders, as you step into those kind of roles, that you will bear in mind. Invest in upfront. Go through the difficult decision-making, the details, and so on. Your life will be so much happier and more pleasant downstream, okay? If you kick the thing down the road, it will come back to haunt you one way sooner or later. And we need to continuously cultivate that culture in our construction industry. Let me tell you a quick joke. This one was illustrating how mindset goes, all the way down to people building things. There were these two guys working on the roadside, and a lady passerby spotted, said something is not right. They stopped and asked this worker, said, what are you doing? You are digging up the hole, the trench, and your partner is filling it back up. What are you doing? And the worker said, ma'am, you see, we were supposed to be a team of 3 people. The second guy got sick. The second guy is supposed to lay the pipe. He got sick, so he can't come to work. We have to continue to do our work. So you dig, you fill back without the pipe. It's a funny story, but it does characterize sometimes the mindset. It's not my job. Sorry if somebody else is not there. I will just do whatever I need to do. And if this mindset get translated into our increasingly high-tech and smart buildings, guess what? We are in for a rough ride, very rough ride. So go back to the fundamentals, build teamwork, coordinate so that everything we design, all the smart, infrastructure truly can work and can be sustained to work, not just on opening day. It has to continue to work 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and hopefully 50 years into the future.
Yeah, Prof, as a Provost Chair Professor of Architecture and Building and the Dean of the School of Design and Environment, NUS, and the Emeritus Professor of Architecture at Carnegie Mellon University, you play an instrumental role in nurturing the next generation of built environment professionals. What is your philosophy in guiding young professionals in preparing them for the future?
Well, the first philosophy is you have to be prepared to work very hard and be always critical in your thinking and not just accept things as they are, because if you do that, guess what, right? When you come into a university to study, it takes 4 years to get an undergraduate degree. If you want to do a master, it might take you another year or 2, right? If you do PhD, another 4 or 5. You spend half your life learning. That's called lifelong learning, right? So you really need to understand the time horizon of things. If you only learn what is easiest, what is most tested and safe, then guess what? 4 years later, 5 years later, you'll be completely lost because things have changed already. Okay, so the critical mind thinking, it needs to be there to learn, and this is something that I constantly try to impart to students at all levels. And of course, as dean, as you know, we've just last year did a lot of work to roll out a common curriculum jointly with the Faculty of Engineering between FOE and SDE. That is one of those things I'm doing together with our colleagues in FOE to offer those opportunities. So again, we must walk the talk. I can say, please go do it, but there's nothing to do. So students will come back and say, yeah, Prof, what can we do? There's no opportunity to do. See, we created those opportunities. Then you need to go chart your way. And then be prepared to chart the unknown. Now, the students sometimes would feel, and I can understand, I can completely understand and sympathize. Say, Prof, too very confusing. Last time we were told what to learn, we done, and 4 years we get our paper, no hassle. Now you ask us to choose. Wow, so complicated. Don't know how to choose, right? And they don't have seniors to teach them because the seniors didn't have the choice. So that is the uncertainty again. I can sympathize, and we are here to help, of course, we're here to help. And to me, that has to be the future. So that they will learn things 4 years later, they are ready for whatever changes that will take place, yeah? And many of this will involve, as I say, cross-disciplinary work moving forward, yeah.
Your involvement in various international boards and projects enable you to interact with many global leaders. As an educator, you are a mentor and role model for many future architects and future built environment leaders. What are some of the key leadership attributes you hope to cultivate in our local young talents, and why?
Well, I think humility, as I said, I learned one of those things, you really have to learn humility and meeting all these people, it's very daunting, very scary, to be honest, at least in the early days. But, one characteristic, again, I recognize, all these famous, quote unquote, people, they are all very, very humble. That is one consistent characteristic that I detect in those very, very successful, very influential people. And Conversely, those that tend to make a lot of noise, sometimes I'm a little cautious. Yeah. I think this is reinforces my belief, right? And the 7 habits, that sense of humility, willing to listen, willing to learn, and instead of jumping to conclusion, and always bringing our own biases, right? I did it that way 20 years ago, you should follow me. It doesn't apply whatsoever, right? So I need to continuously learn. And actually, that because I'm a professor, de facto, I have the opportunity to keep learning, which is very nice, by the way, because I'm in academia. So de facto, I learn. I always tell my PhD students, when I was at Carnegie Mellon, I said, I only have one criterion, very simple one. For me to pass you, to give you a PhD, I have to learn something from you. You have to teach me something that I don't know. Because if you only know what I know, you don't deserve a PhD from me. Reasonable, right? I think. And that really underscores everything that the students do, right? That it is to chart new frontier for their lives and their career. And because of that, I'm very, very happy to say that the students are doing very, very well in their career. My PhD student, one of them is actually a executive vice president of Delos, taking care of all the labs. He was my PhD student. Another one in IWBI doing the certification, Shalini, right? So very proud, very pleased that they were able to grasp those the underlying philosophy and prepare to work hard. If you ask my wife, she very rarely sees me, because when I was doing my PhD, I would be working very hard on projects in the day, and all the paper writing is done at night. The professor and I would go to the 24-hour coffee shop, sit down and write paper when it's very quiet. So it's hard work, but it is important to have that commitment, because you know, someone said, right, no pain, no gain. But again, always remember to have a well-balanced lifestyle. For me, again, de facto, because I have a wife and family and 4 kids, my lifestyle is by de facto have to be well-balanced. I cannot afford to just say concentrate on my study, right? And I had to work 3 jobs to support the family. Some of these jobs are really, again, I learned from them, from cleaning to working in a turkey factory. I work in a turkey factory, and I learned everything about frozen turkey during Christmas. That was quite an experience, to be honest. This was during my first year. If you want to learn more about turkey, I know everything. I worked 3 months in the turkey factory. Just as a fun part, you know the turkey legs that go into the backside, right? When you buy the turkey, the legs are in the backside, right? To get those legs into the backside require expert skill. It's not a simple thing, especially when the turkey is 20, 30 pounds. So when I first day on the job, they put me in that station, many stations, and the ladies were watching me. A lot of ladies they were watching me, and I was struggling to put this leg into the backside, and couldn't do it. I mean, this is a huge 20, 30 pound turkey. Couldn't do it. They stood there laughing. Very humbling and very humiliated. Okay. But then finally, one of the ladies said, I'll show you how to do it. You know what the trick was? The trick was simply to bend the leg out, stretch it opposite direction, stretch it out. And for that split second, miraculously, the turkey leg muscle loosened up. For that split second, and you then quickly shove it in, and then it tightened up again. Okay. So
you must grab that second.
That second, you are slow, you will get rigid again, and you have to do it again. And meanwhile, it is in the conveyor belt. The kids are coming non-stop. So, example like that, which is what I learned, that every skill, no matter what we think is, menial or small and so on, require expertise and experience, right? And that is the other lesson I learned, and I bring it back into my life and into my professional work. Never, ignore, neglect others, thinking that you know everything. You don't, okay? But having learned it, I can now say I know everything. So during Christmas in UK, I always tell a story, right? On the Christmas dinner. In US, they serve turkey at Thanksgiving, not Christmas. UK do, Christmas turkey. US do Thanksgiving turkey.
Yeah, we have Sin Yong. He has a question for you. Yeah, Sin Yong.
Hi, Sin Yong. You are muted, Sin Yong.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Hi, Prof. Lam. I have a question on the topic of skill sets, or rather mindset for future leaders. I think the HO sort of advice for professionals, right, has always been to, specialize and deep expertise. But in the last, couple of years, a lot of leaders talking about, future leaders, they'll be like generalists. That means they have a broad perspective of things instead of deep specialization. So just want to hear your opinion on this generalist specialist debate in, I don't know, in the built environment sector, perhaps. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, very good question. To me, and if you look at my own career path and my own life, I have never consciously or unconsciously differentiated that, by the way. Generalist versus specialist. I've never seen the world like that, and neither did I see the profession like that. To me, as an architect, now you're an architect, I'm an architect. Although people say I'm an engineer in an architect's body, but that's another story. As an architect, our profession is by definition an integrative one. That's how it has been and must continue to be. And so therefore, with the ongoing expansion of sort of knowledge, right, and specialized fields, it then becomes a real challenge, I understand. And sometimes we get all sort of disoriented and distracted. My advice is don't get distracted, all right? Focus on those things that I was talking about, the core principles, the core mission of why we build, why we design, why we build. Don't get distracted from that, all right? And once you have and sort of grasp that, you will have a very different perspective onto this notion of specialization. And you can then learn and be humble and spend time learning. And this is where what you call lifelong learning comes in. We all have to continue to learn. We cannot stay still. By the way, as a profession, you have to chalk up CDP points, continuing profession. So that's the purpose. We got to continue to learn. So, and when you learn, you then will garner sufficient knowledge to be an effective integrator. So that when somebody comes to you and propose something, or actually most of the time when architects say something, the experts say, sorry, cannot be done. And you are like stuck, okay, I don't know why, but I take your word. But once you have the fundamentals, then the dialogue can start. Why? Is there another way around it? Okay. And therefore, this notion of being specialist and being generalist, to me, is not so clear anymore, right? That the role of the team and the architect as the leader, in this case, would continue to be implemented. And then you need to then seek to understand your team members, the engineers and landscape and IT people enough so that a rational and a productive conversation can take place. Then we then do what we call systems integration design. And at the end of the day, guess what? The outcome always is win-win. Again, it goes back to one of those points. It's a win-win. Everybody will be happy. Nobody will be left out. So that's something that I think from the professional point of view, that's the mindset that needs to be done. To be honest, again, many of the aspects of so-called specialization, the fundamentals are not rocket science. They are just fundamental physics, in my view anyway. Things that you learn in A-level, by the way, which we give it all back to the teacher already. Right? Those are still relevant. Heat, cooling, sound, for example. All this you learn in A-levels physics. Those are there, and you just refresh and build on them so that you can then, as I said, the other part of the story, of course, is in the actual convincing the people who build it, right? The implementers. As much as the design team and everybody align, assume, but getting the industry, the contractors and the subcontractors and the suppliers line up, that I think remains the biggest challenge. Okay. But again, as I said, we keep working at it and try to explain to people the human-centric, people-centric goals. Whatever we build, we are living in it ourselves, right? Because it affects all of us. So to raise that to that level of awareness, then hopefully people will buy in. And then the last but not least, dispel this notion of cost. To me, that's, again, when all arguments fail, this is like the trump card people use to excuse not to do something, cost. And nobody can tell me, what are you talking about? Tell me, what cost are you talking about, right? And then the people tend to fumble and get lost in the details. So yeah, you want to talk about cost, let's sit down and talk about cost, right? Where are the costs going? Are you buying golden taps that maybe you don't need, right? Are you having marble, Italian imported marble that maybe you don't need because that's very unsustainable? Questions like that, right? That would need to be, again, openly, honestly, in a productive and positive way talk about. Then you'll be amazed how much cost you can save, okay, for superfluous things that we don't really need for one. So yeah, we need to work on both ends. I think the professions have come a long way, I think, but the delivery of all these ideas still needs a lot more effort, a lot more work, in my opinion. And so at the same time, giving them the due recognition and the due, reward system helps so that you recognize them for their expertise. Like the lady knowing how to put the chicken feet, the turkey legs into the backside. Pay her correctly.
Thank you, Prof. Lam.
Okay.
Yeah, but Prof, now you pointed out a very important role. I mean, the system integrator, the one who's going to play that role, it's going to be really critical. Yeah. So as a strong advocate for building urban resilience and designing healthy cities via greater collaboration among stakeholders in the sector, what do you think Singapore can do better in fostering collaboration across all stakeholders, including Institute of Higher Learning?
Well, Singapore, I have to say, being a small and tight-knit society, community, and a nation, it has the advantage of this accessibility and communication. All of us wear different hats at different times. And so sometimes I'm sitting on this side of the table, sometimes I'm sitting on the other side of the table. And so we understand the roles and responsibilities of parties from all sides, right? So I think that is a very good starting point that we can build on with regard to enhancing collaboration. And that is happening at IHLs for sure. And the other thing, of course, is setting the tone in terms of the high level aspirations. And I think, again, Singapore is doing an amazing work. Every time I participate in global, sort of think tanks and the World Economic Forum or WHO, they always recognize Singapore has clearly been constantly forging ahead. So in the most current, right, sort of development of the Singapore Green Plan, and then not only looking at it as a static thing, but constantly reviewing, revising, pushing the bar, say, let's do it faster. Instead of 5 years, can we do it in 3 years? To me, all this augur very well. I've always lamented as a researcher, now putting on my researcher hat, the time lapse between what we do in research and develop and come out with well-tested and well-proven technology, right? That will support health and wellness and green and sustainability. By the time it becomes normal in terms of the scale of adoption, it takes about 10 to 15 years. Now, any other industry, you would have closed shop, right? Let's say your IT industry, if you wait that long to roll out your next version of your mobile phone, you might as well close shop, right? But our industry is like that, took extremely long. And so every time I go to visit sites or in conferences, and people will say, oh, this is cutting edge. And I was thinking to myself, yeah, I did that about 10 years ago. The kind of, so point is, we need to absolutely condense that time, all right? And I don't mean rushing things. I mean adopting what we already know and proven. Photovoltaics, for example, it's the same story as an example, right? Solar PV. I started studying solar PV when I became a lecturer in the 1980s, okay? And people thought I was mad. They said, Mr. Lam, you're crazy. It never happened. Too expensive, right? Et cetera, et cetera. So, well, today, nobody talks about that anymore, right? Of course, solar PV, certainly in Singapore, that's the case. So I think that is the sort of continuous drive, right? What leaders need to do. And the government of Singapore, in its leadership role, are championing and fostering all this. They are walking the talk as we speak, right? The fact that they asked the major stakeholder still, right, as far as the built environment is concerned, makes it a very powerful mechanism that I think the rest of the world are clearly acknowledging what Singapore is doing.
Yeah, true. I agree on that. I mean, yeah, the government is also doing a lot and pushing forward. Next is on COVID-19. I mean, COVID-19 has been dubbed the crisis of our generation, and it has certainly changed the way many organizations operate. How can the industry make use of the crisis of the generation to hasten industry transformation and emerge stronger?
Yes, it leads back to the fundamental focus on good design. Design in its multiple facets, not just design as in making the building look pretty, which is also important, by the way. Because I always refer back to, again, a history that sticks in my mind, Vitruvius, right? He said architecture is about firmness, delight, and usefulness, right? Or commodity, firmness, and delight. So all three are important. It has to perform well, it has to stand, and then it has to look good, and it has to be useful. And based on that sort of philosophy, throughout the concept that I've been belabeling on this total building performance, again, talks about the importance of providing flexibility and adaptability in our buildings from the get-go, in order to retain the value, the intrinsic value of the building amidst all the changes. So that philosophy now totally is in the forefront because of COVID. The practical sort of illustration of that is really in the way we design the zoning of our buildings. Zoning for activities and zoning for air conditioning or thermal control. And again, so often we fall back to the lowest denominator of the code, right? If the code asks us to put one thermostat, we'll put one thermostat, right? In the entire floor. And you would then philosophically or conceptually ask yourself, how can everybody be happy in that one floor if I was sitting on the east side of the window? The morning sun is going to hit me, it's going to be warm. The people on the west side will be cool. And then in the afternoon, the other people will be feeling hot, and then the east side will be feeling cool. So surely you must give two different sets of control, right? In the two different zones, I call it. I mean, it's just, to me, common sense. But so often that common sense is not commonly adopted because of cost. And people will say, well, it's costly. Number two, the code doesn't need it. So why are you asking me to do this? Yeah? So this is where the challenge is. But COVID now completely gives us a whole different perspective. And it reinforces so many of the values that the concept talks about. We did very extensive research on the cost of human sort of performance in office buildings, commercial buildings. Actually, most of our early days focus was on commercial buildings. Guess what? The cost of the people is 80% of your business. The building energy is actually very, very small, relatively speaking. It doesn't mean it's not important, huh? It's still important, even though energy may be 5% of your cost. But guess what? If climate change happened, then it's the end anyway. But why are you not investing in the 80% of your people? Meaning providing them with a good environment. And there are story after story we tell our students to illustrate our values and priorities. One example was, if you go to your boss and say, hey, I need a faster computer, I can be more productive. I need the latest, 5G communication or what have you. And guess what? Most of the time, your boss will say, yeah, of course. Understood, can, right? Go, do. But then you say, well, my light is actually causing eye strain. There's a glare coming from the screen. Can you redesign the layout of the light? Oh, that's very expensive. Cannot do, right? So that's how we prioritize and value people in some cases, right? Whereas if you give the people the best conducive environment, then just a fraction of a percent improvement in the happiness and health, absenteeism and the impact on the health insurance and sick days and all that, more than cover that investment, that you created separate controls, okay? Now COVID has shown us that, hey guys, no choice, you must do, right? Unless you want to be exposed again. So that's an example of a story, and we have real data to show all this. It's not just make-up stories, huh? Real data. Now on the well one was very interesting. Give you the second story. And this is Paul Sheila, the founder, I told you. He told this story. He said when he started selling this idea of well certification, it was an uphill battle like anything else, right? By the way, the green building took about 10 years before it became, right, sort of common. It wasn't common in the first time. So when he went around selling this idea, you get your building well certified, people say, oh, no way, costly. Then he said, okay, he's done some research. How much he's talking to this very big multinational companies. how much do you spend per employee on health benefits? I don't mean medical benefits, health, lifestyle, meaning membership to the gym. You know, a lot of these big companies give the employees gym membership or access to, you know, sports and things like that, right? So he did a survey and it turned out that on average, a company spends about $700 per employee per year, membership and other things that contribute, supposedly will contribute to the wellness, the well-being of the employee. Then the next question he asked in the survey was, how many percent of the staff use the gym or use the facilities? Turns out that only 20%. Okay, so he said, you mean you are throwing away 80% of $700 every year? And he said, how about my suggestion? He said, invest $100 one time into your building, renovate it, retrofit it for wellness. And you are guaranteed 100% participation because we all work in the building, right? And it lasts. At least it will last a few years, right? It's not an annual renewal thing. That to me was a very, I mean, that's why he's so good, right? In a few short years, he built his company. Now I think his capital valued at almost, the last time I saw was $800 million valued. So within a few short years. So he's able to, again, went ahead of the curve. Of course, didn't predict pandemic, nobody. And we certainly do not wish to have pandemic, of course, right? We don't want pandemic to be the reason to benefit. That should not be the case. So that's, I think, the examples, right? That we go back to this people-centric, because that's your real cost. The people are your real cost. Because if we don't take care of that, guess what? It's not the building industry that will bear the crunch. The health care will bear the crunch of the cost to the country in the long run, especially with an aging population that Asia is experiencing. So proactive, see, go back to the good habit of being proactive and invest in that proactive, put your money where your mouth is, and the benefits will come. I can absolutely justify that.
But the battle with COVID-19 has been going on for the past 2 years, and built environment is actually one of the worst hit sectors. What would be the key advice for young professional looking to join the industry in these trying times?
Yeah, I know, again, a very, very pertinent question. I want to go back to my earlier point about education. Education is not instant. You join today, you graduate in 4 years. Guess what? I have lived long enough to see the economic cyclical situation. And this has happened in Singapore. When I joined NUS in 1984, remember, you may not remember, there was a recession. There was the first time Singapore went into recession in 1987, if I remember correctly. And everybody panicked, you know, and understandably, parents probably will advise the children, don't near there. And guess what? Those graduates 5 years later hit the boom. Came 1990, 91, it was a construction boom. And they were like totally busy. In fact, a little scary, to be honest, fresh out and they're asked to do high-rise building. It's a bit scary, but that's the situation, right? So always think that it is, don't think of it now, right? Especially for the education, that it takes time. And therefore use all these unfortunate circumstances as important learning lessons, and we will, as educators, continuously offer case studies and examples to train you so that you are prepared. in 4 years, 5 years time when you get into the industry. And this phenomenon, I hope the young people will really, really remember. You know, it's not an instant world, okay? I know WhatsApp and WeChat and all that is instant, but when it comes to living, it's not instant. Huh? We need to be patient. We need to have the right attitude moving forward. I can also quote another example of computer science. I would say, 15 years ago, computer science certainly in the US was the least desired course. And the reason at that point was people have this funny kind of perception. Don't study computer science. You end up being a programmer, you know, which is, again, is not true at all. But that was somehow the message and the perception. So people stayed away from computer science. And it was one of those lowest subscribed, you know. And now today, computer science is the hottest program in the US and in Singapore, I think. So, you know, and it's a cycle, right? And so don't sort of make your decision based on those kind of things. Make your decision based on your passion, based on, you know, people in your life, your family, colleagues, friends, whoever, who have some influence and you sort of catch on something, build on those and chart your own way. And the cyclical situation will continue to happen. Don't worry about it. Pandemic, COVID will go away and there will be another pandemic. Everybody said that already, right? Just a question of what. It's not when, it's when and what, I suppose. So this is something that, you know, the future leaders must, and the young people must be prepared to confront.
Yeah, thank you, Prof. Lam. Well, that is all the time we have for today. So thank you for sharing with us your valuable experience and inspiring us with your insights. We certainly look forward to more sharing sessions with you in the future.
Yeah.
And to our audience, thank you all for attending. Stay tuned for the next session of the Build Lead Conversation series. This is Ina signing off.
Wait.
Bye.
Wait. May I just say one more thing?
Yes, sure.
If I may, just as in closing. One of the, you know, sort of thoughts in people is always that, oh, it's a big sacrifice I have to make. I really want to say that when you pursue something like that, for me, certainly, the sacrifice was not so much me, but actually my wife. And I think she's in the audience. As I told you, I have a family of 4 children with very, very diverse needs. And without her sacrifice to take care of the family, with all its very diverse needs, the 4 kids I have are really, really diverse, ranging for a super smart youngest who went to university at 16 years old, graduated at 20 years old, became a vet, full qualified vet at 27. She's super smart, finished a degree with straight A's, you know. And then I have 2 kids who are smart but very different personality. One who quite kind of conservative and introvert, helping the mom take care of the siblings. The other very extrovert who would constantly want to attend every party that every friend throws, and the wife had to take care of that. And then last but not least, my 3rd daughter who has an 18p chromosome disorder and is a special need, okay? So you can see the diversity of the human needs, even in my own immediate family. And I have to say, my wife is sacrificed. It's many, many times more than mine. Okay? At least my pursuit ends up with a degree and some title. She is back home at the back, making sure the kids are all well taken care of, and they are all flourishing very well, thanks to her nurturing. Even the one with the disability. And of course, for me, I'm able to do what I do because, you know, she continued to back me up. So I really want to say that this is really important. Family, you know, every person, every good leader must treasure that. Don't take it for granted. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Lam, as well in the audience. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.